So good evening, everybody. I'm Dr. Meena Katecha, a faculty member in the Department of Psychological and Behavioral Science here at the LSE. And as a member of the IMA, London Branch Committee, I would like to invite you all to this evening's lecture. I have a great pleasure and honor to introduce you to Dr. Vempali, who has kindly agreed to give this talk today. Dr. Vempali is a consultant ophthalmic surgeon and has worked in senior managerial and research positions in the NHS for more than 30 years. He's a keen learner and an inspirational leader. He has an executive MBA from the University of Cambridge. He's a fellow of the Royal Colleges of London and Edinburgh. He's also a member of American Academy of Ophthalmology. He completed an artificial intelligence program at the University of Oxford in 2020. His current passion is machine learning applications in healthcare delivery for day-to-day clinical practice, particularly focusing on eye care management. And I could just go on, but without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Vempali to tell us something about mathematics of eye management care. Thank you. Please.
Can I take this?
Yes.
Thank you, Meena, for the kind words, and thank you all for attending this evening. And it's what an honor to be invited for you to be speaking about the subject that I'm interested in front of such learned audiences. It's been a pleasure, absolute pleasure. What I'd like to do is I just want to give you a little bit of background about who am I. That's the one. I trained initially in India, and I started medicine in 1980, finished medicine in 85, 86, did a 6 months in surgery. I didn't like too much of general surgery, plastic surgery, too much morbidity and burns, all sorts of. So I decided to go into eyes, which was so nice and sleek, and you get immediate results with it. So I thought, amazing, it is so nice. And there's no death involved in the eyes. As far at that time, that's very good specialty for me. I'd love that. Then I went on and did 6 years of ophthalmology in India, 3 years in postdoc in cornea. I was a National Eye Bank officer there, grading the corneas for corneal donation. And then I came to Oxford and trained in Oxford in cornea. And then I went to Moorfields Eye Hospital and I trained in pediatric ophthalmology. As part of it, I was in Great Ormond Street and Russell Square doing the neuro part of it. So I did the training in that. But then I didn't want to work in the center of London, getting by tube to central. So I said, but I love my Indian food. The best place to go is Bishop's Stortford, I thought, because I can go to East End over the weekend to get things I wanted, at the same time maintain contact with the Central Institute. That was my brief story. But after that, I've worked for 20 years in the NHS as a consultant, as a R&D director for the trust. And then I decided I'll just carry on the private that I was doing, 2 days of private work. And then I wanted to create more time for me to go back and learn. I felt acute need to learn something more in 2016. So I went back to Cambridge and did this 3 years of totally different subjects. I wanted to learn corporate finance, economics, whatever. So it was quite interesting to stimulate the tools to learn. So that was very useful for me. But as part of that, then I went to Google and listened to the Google lectures there. And it was quite interesting and fascinating because a lot of the computers we take for granted have underlying mathematical algorithms, as we know. But I wasn't formally trained in mathematics, so I had to go back and start with the numbers. Where did the numbers begin? So it took me 5 years to get back to the original, where the numbers, 80,000 years ago, to coming back on a road that I could navigate through open source learning. That's what I did. And then I got interested in the AI, because AI, I will talk about that in a moment, and because it's becoming a reality in our clinical practice that we really have to do something about it. Otherwise, it's no longer no other option. You have to, because you have to co-opt with them. I have no financial interest in this presentation, but I must acknowledge two of my colleagues, Prof. Piers Kane. He's the leading light of AI in healthcare in this country. He was a trainee of my colleague in Moorfields, and Professor Alex was my contemporary at Moorfields, but he's running the MRC program for model eye, creating a virtual eye. How do we get all the mathematical information, the dynamics of a model eye? Because on one hand, the computer technology is improving, but we need to really match it up with what really this means. And because at the moment, we'll come to that, what this means and this noise means to us in clinical practice. So who are the people involved in here? Primarily the patient should benefit from this. And then we have a wonderful optometrists all around the country doing lots of fantastic jobs. And orthoptists are the people who measure the vision in children and squints and things like that. So they give valuable information about the developmental vision aspects of children. And there are specialist nurses in ophthalmology, technicians who do ultrasounds, all sorts of things in our research collaborators, and policymakers, and now the bigger role is being the AI being another big partner amongst us to carry forward the work that we do. And the idea is to early detect any problem that before it happens, if we can, and then is there evidence-based treatment for it? Look for it. And then that should be accessible to each person who's involved in that value chain. I think that's the most difficult bit. Because there are, the people hide behind the shadows of other things. If you have a surgeon who is the leading light, he casts a bigger shadow than anybody else, and that's actually a shadow of nonsense. You don't want that. You want everybody to be in the light. And that is the most difficult thing to do. When people are highly, leading big teams, it's very, very difficult the power distance increases quite a bit. This is the lingo that we use in management. The power distance has to be narrowed. That's the most important thing. And that's a very difficult thing to do. And you must be conscious of it all the time. And then the comprehensive eye care is as a whole nation. What are we doing? How are we doing? And I'll just give you an example, one just hypothetical scenario. Imagine every one of you on your phone has your ophthalmologist as a virtual image on you. And in the middle of the night, you tap on him, say that I have a cataract done yesterday, and can you have a look at my eye? And he should look at the eye through that. And he has your records, goes to the GPT, answers the question. It's called replica eye. So imagine that scenario where a person, your own doctor, accesses your own records, compares with the internationally available data, and then takes the information or observation, which is limited by the receptor technology we have at the moment, and gives an information. This is something, it's not imaginary, it's actually happening nowadays. Surprisingly, I have it in my pocket, a replica of me. So it can happen. These sort of things are coming. They're not too far. And the rapidity with which it's happening is actually very frightening. Where are we heading? That's an important question we'll all have to ask ourselves as well. And if generally mathematics and eye means it goes back 2,500 years ago. So because the eye, there's a biologic system, geometry was the main thing that we talked about. But I'm not going to talk anything about that at the moment. And this is just a picture to show how initially to the latest wavefront analysis of the corneal things, you can have a look at all of those things from one end to the other end. The optics and geometry has evolved so much. But then I went back and said, what actually practical maths do clinicians know and want to do? So there's a book published on this. It's called Clinical Maths for Clinical Practice. And I looked at it and said, mostly algebra. It's about how to calculate the dosages, the fraction. And this is something that we used to do in the set. Now computers do that. We don't really do. How much change do I have to give back after giving me £1? I don't do that anymore. The computer tells me. So this sort of things are being done automatically in the system. If I have a drip set up, I'll tell you the regulatory rate. Everything it tells, you put the BMI in it, it calculates everything. Now you really, this was the 20th century medicine that we needed that. When the drugs were invented, when the radiation doses had to be calibrated, all these things, body measurement. But then we moved away from that. Now sensors are there. They'll pick up all that data. They'll control the medicines. They'll do everything. They'll also reject things that people are allergic to. So everything is put into the system. Computers have done all of that stuff. Now where are we going? This is the question. What sort of mathematics do we need for the next bit of it? And this is the bit will always be there, because statistics, to understand the papers, as clinicians, we need to have certain basic level of understanding about the power of the study. What does it mean? Does it actually mean what it says? You really need to understand those things. And it's a continuous process of improvement. You need to constantly keep learning those things. As a second, for researchers, obviously, it's quite crucial to have the power of the study. And we always, I was just talking, very often the culture of involving the statistician is somewhere like a bit ad hoc, it's at the moment. Some of the studies that are being done are just a waste of time for everybody if you don't get them involved very early in the study and actually get the foundations from them. What does this mean? What do I need to do this study? And that comes from some kind of early intervention from the statisticians and people who know a little bit more about it. I think that's important. And that's still lagging behind. It's improving, but it's still lagging behind compared to the other things. And as modern things, I asked ChatGPT, what lecture should I give? And this gave me this. So, okay. So I said, GPT-4, tell me, what should I talk about mathematics and I? He said, blah, 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 statistics. Okay, I know all of that stuff, but I won't have enough time to cover all of those domains. So I must say something about it. We all know what areas are involved here. So one of the things I wanted to say, I'll come back to this slide in a moment later. So is this a new era? The new era of what? The great AI awakening. And this is because, if you look at it, I'll just give you one example. Up until 2016, if this eye was, fundus picture was presented to me, all I could say was, if it's in the right orientation, say, it's the left eye, the optic disc appears healthy, there's no pressure in the brain, no increased pressure in the brain, there's no evidence of any diabetic changes, and it looks fine to me as no significant pathology. That's what my word would be. But after that, give it to the computer, it says, this is a woman's retina. How did it pick it up? And this is a 58-year-old lady who's a non-smoker, not diabetic. This is the power, and she has a systolic blood pressure. So she actually mapped out the journey of this patient from that data, just looking at one snapshot. Isn't it short of magical? If she could map out her journey till now, it's frightening where she can map out a journey till the end. We don't know that. There may be metadata hidden there, which could tell us when it's going to end as well. So this is the frightening area, but we haven't got the answers to that yet. So this is what excited me to understand more about what we humans can't see, but the machines can read. And we thought they're not just telling the stories. Although GPT can hallucinate, we've got to be very careful about the hallucinations of GPT. That's a big problem with GPT-4. Will be some hallucinations going on which are so realistic that people will believe the truth. So it's got to be very, very careful about that aspect of it. And this is transforming our healthcare. Basically, what is this? I tried to learn coding for 3 years. I did some Python coding, R coding, and things like that. But then I realized that I don't have to, because I can ask GPT-4, write a code for me, Python code for getting all the cataract pictures from my 6,500 patients folders, put them in 4 folders, label them, pre and post op. So all this code is actually given to me. All that is, I open a Jupyter notebook and enter the code, and it's done. So you don't even have to learn code anymore now. So it liberates people from actually conceptualizing the thoughts rather than worrying about, did I just put the tab in the right place or not? I had a column, did I do that correctly? You don't have to worry about it anymore. So it's a big liberation in terms of the of coding. I think it's a very useful, but this will be tested again. Of course, we will be looking at, is it imaginary code? They say, well, what are the problems with this? We'll have to look at that. But one fundamental thing is, codes it can do, but mathematics, you need to know what it is doing. And that bit is your domain. So you still have to understand the mathematics. Now, do I apply linear regression to this, or do I logistic regression to this, or what type of analysis? Am I going to do something called dimensionality reduction here? What is that? What is it I'm looking for? People should have an idea about those aspects, the overarching concepts about. Now, this is my domain. This is the area that the global, and what am I going to look at this? So that's important. And this, the modern achievement is all because of this world-changing idea called deep learning. Demis Hassabis, set up this DeepMind in 2014. I think his company was bought by Google for a paltry sum of $500 million. I think. And the idea is basically you give computers, because you have to have something going simultaneously with you. One of the lucky things that happened was between 2006 and 2000, the GPU processing capacity has increased. The NVIDIA came up with this wonderful, wonderful parallel processing units. And that made so much easier. You can run, for example, 1 trillion bits of data in your home computer. So 100 TOPS. 275 TOPS on a trillion bits of information. Nowadays, you can get on a little nano device using only, a USB, mini USB with 5. It's not like a gas guzzler. So the technology has come so fast and so improved. So it's becoming, so that's one of the things that, so this is the basic thing. There is an input layer, an output layer, and something is happening in the middle, and all the weights, we need to understand what we don't need to, the computer scientists will do all that, but what you really need to know is this is the mechanism in which it undergoes. And then we'll come to that still understanding about what is transparent AI and understandable AI. We need to really think about those things because at the moment AI, I think there's a black box, you throw something in and it churns out something, you accept it, or you leave it. That's the way that at the moment. But then we need to understand something called explainable AI, and that's the big field itself. Obviously, that is going on still. And at the moment, it's still the areas that are there are not 100% explainable. They can say that, okay, this is the gradient on which, these are maps that we created, but what does it mean? That's in clinical settings. That's what I want to really know. One of the ways we can actually do is, most of the studies that we do on deep learning, even if you have a Bayesian model, it uses naive Bayesian tech. That is, but in human body, everything has a relativity. If somebody has a keratoconus or a corneal projection, if you lift the lid up, they'll have like a papillae or swellings under them. They're related. There's a certain degree of proportionality and relationship. So we have to do something called directed Bayesians for these things. So, and the directed Bayesians how can you direct, say, variables which are the covariables, which are about, say, 100 to 150 in the least. And it could be many more than that, which we don't know. So this is where the professionals have to come in and use the current methodology and excuse me, current methodology to help the data scientists to actually help them make sense of these the covariances that they have to model into their system. It's very, very important. And this is another big step, because do you have to have, because it's data hungry, most of the stuff. Do you have to have so much data as a clinician in my set? So I don't have the same data as Moorfields has. Moorfields has about, say, 500,000 patients going through their outlook. In my clinic, maybe we have about, say, 40,000 patients in a year, which is not as big as, So we have a positive data. Can I take a trained model from somewhere and then use my data on it? It's called transfer learning. I can take the learning that's gained in the model, and I use that model. And that's becoming more and more popular and easier, shorter training time. And also you can personalize to that domain that you're interested in. Suppose if I want to do in a pediatric domain, in a uveitis domain, in a cornea domain, you can use those particular expertise in that particular, and it's very helpful. So it's less laborious, already tested. For example, we have different models, versions of it. These models are giving us a probabilistic data about a question. How far is it from the ground truth? What is ground truth? Clinically, we face this is ground truth, and the ground is moving. Also, we need to understand those things, the concept of what is ground truth. Ground truth is what is perceived at the moment as a diagnosis. But then, that will change. In 10 years' time or 50 years' time, my diagnosis will be completely, I said, they used to call this. It could be like that. So we need to understand that. And then, who are the ground truth people? This is very important. That's where the clinicians come in. So the ground truth people should always work in partnership with the mathematicians, with the technologists, because in the middle was a lot of data crunch. That's gone out of the window. Now you can actually use the systems. So it's actually middleman is being narrowed down. So in other words, direct approach to the higher concepts of mathematics, why you should do, or statistics, why we should do, directly to the clinicians. That big sag is becoming taught now, straight, almost straight. So that's something happening. I would call it a statistics on steroids, basically, with the graphics processors, because, and all of this can be done from your laptop, as I was saying, but you still need to have those mathematical concepts and the lingo to go with it. And what are the ophthalmic applications that currently, so FDA approved for the first time an AI tool better than a doctor to diagnose diabetic retinopathy in 2019. Would you believe that? A machine can diagnose better than a specialist doctor who's been trained all his life in ophthalmology, but can't beat the machine. Are we going to go down this route in many other specialties? We don't know that yet, because it's really becoming frightfully very, very difficult to understand how do the clinicians fit in with this? And what is going to happen to these things? And suddenly, if somebody pulls a plug, what happens to the population? We really need to think about, these are some ethical issues and moral issues and distributive justice issues. We need to think about all the other elements involved in the healthcare distribution. So what I thought was, I took out about just over 1,000 cataracts I did in the last few years, and then I put the pictures of my patients into a model, and then it's just on my laptop, and then it tells me that if I put another next picture on that, it tells me the probability of me advising the patient to have a cataract surgery based on the pictures that I've already loaded on them. So you can get an idea. So everyone can create their own individual personalized repertoire of their function, clinical outputs. And that is, this kind of tool was never available in the past. Either you had a system where you had a student and the students learn from the masters and the masters learn. It's a kind of a system. But now the computers will learn, and it's your student, and it'll tell you what it's doing. That's fascinating. And it can give you an accuracy of that level. And the big thing that happened is the large language models in September of last year. And that has actually changed some aspects of human understanding, and understandably some of the countries banned it as well for the security reasons. But you cannot ban progress, I wouldn't call progress, I would development or future, because that's something that is innate in human thing. You can never put constraints on that, although the people are calling they should have a summer cool down period or something. They were asking for research. But we have to think about better words than that to see where we can actually ask the community to focus their attention. That's more important than asking them to say, oh, let's have a chill out summer. So this is an image I asked. I just gave the information on my phone to generate an image of a 50-year-old British female with a cataract. And this is what it gave me, generative AI. And generative AI is free. Everybody can access it just on the phone. Would you believe that? And I said, okay, it's nice to see. I said, let me ask an ophthalmologist, a 60-year-old ophthalmologist with black hair, just give me a picture of it. Turns out that. So this is the power of the generative AI. And this person doesn't exist, but it just comes up, makes up the picture. As younger than a 50-year-old. Yeah, exactly. Oh, I know. It is. But at least it tried to. The idea of this generative AI, the principle behind it is very powerful. What we can do is, in the past we used to have trial data, test data, and we have two arms of the data. Now what we can do is, these are my patients, you create dummy patients for me. And then we'll use a competition between the discriminator, between the two. And then we'll keep on iterating it millions and millions and millions of times until I find out the fake. So this is how the discriminator works, you see. And that is actually improving the diagnostic accuracy of our technology. And that is becoming a big generative adversarial network. It started by Ian Goodfellow in 2018. And it's a very, very good concept to actually develop your own data, to fight against your own data, and come up with it and put a discriminator and figure out how good are you picking up a fake versus the real thing. And that's very challenging. And then extension of that will be a self-supervised vision transformers, or masked encoders, we call them as. Basically, no data in this universe is perfect 100%. There will be holes in the data all the time. Any information that you collect is not 100%. It's just not possible that even if you do a cross-sectional or perspective, there will be areas where there will be data losses and data, I would call it as, which corrupted, for example, can be. So how do you fix that? You'd be surprised. This is the images, just give the patches of that to that, and it reconstructs the image of the retina. That's a bit frightening in a way. How does it actually understand, almost with accuracy at the moment? And this is improving as we speak. The technology to fill in and replicate the underlying true nature of the image is almost approaching 98, 99% of accuracy. And it'll never reach 100% because 100% is like an infinity. It's very difficult. We probably will never reach. But is it good enough for my purpose at the moment? That's what we really have to look at. Is it enough for me to make the diagnosis? Is it enough for me to evaluate the efficacy of my treatment? And these are the things that we really need to understand from I think so. In a couple of years' time, we're going to get there already. So we really we're not hiding behind partial data, hidden data, missing data, corrupted data. This is going to be revolutionizing what we're going to do in terms of all the data that's missing out. And this is, again, of retinal tomograms. We call them as OCT scans. And basically what it does is it uses the algorithms to project what would have been there, and then it generates the images there, and then the encoder says, no, it's rubbish, and then it comes back. So the iteration can go on and on and on. When you sleep, it goes on and it does all the job. In the morning, you say, oh, this is your picture of your eye with missing bits here and there. So you can get out. So these are the things that are being done in the background, which is amazing. And this is the most terrifying aspect. We know there are physical processes happening, layer by layer, but they don't proceed in a particular, there are elements which are coming out of it which are emergent. And these emergent characteristics are very, very difficult to predict. And that is what is happening. So we don't know. I'll just give you an example of this. Imagine you've got a little cartoon like that, and you have that. And then I've given that to what movie do these emojis describe? That's my question. And this computer can actually do that. Would you believe that? It actually behaves like a human. It can actually figure out that it's Finding Nemo. How did it get that? How does it know that there's a movie called Finding Nemo? So these are the emergent abilities of computers, which is a bit frightening in the sense that there are domains which we never expected. For example, I never expected, looking at the fundus, to say that she's a 58-year-old, non-diabetic, non-smoking, with a BMI of 25.4, whatever. I had no idea with that. But now all this information is being presented to us through and that is accuracy. It's not like something that's conjured up or imagined. It is the real information from the patient, because we can test that based on the ground truth. And that is very fascinating. So in this era, I just thought, what kind of mathematics can help people? It's very difficult because as clinicians, we are primarily concerned about caregiving, but also at the same time, we need to get up-to-date knowledge about the conditions and also the methods, methodologies. And it's quite important. We're very good at actually erasing our memory of mathematics as soon as we get to finish the exams. And we are experts in that. really experts. You know? So the problem is, unless you get a paper or something, you just put it. Yeah, you don't. You know, oh, median. What is it? You forget. You know, you just raise it from memory. They're very, very. But the question is, you can't do that with the modern technology. You really, really have to be up to it. But it has to be very fun and learning and actually very useful with your own data. Because most of the previous generations, research was actually mainly had taken place at Moorfields or teaching hospitals or national. Now there's a democratization of research as well. So anybody can participate in a national database. We can send that information, collaborative information. So that has actually changed, opened the scope of people to actually enrich themselves a little bit with the, and also the open, the democratization of learning, which is a big threat for the education sector as it is. It's going to be, and this is a big topic in Harvard as well, I would imagine. It's a serious, you have to think in a different way. What are the human faculties that those things can't give? And those are the faculties that we really have to harness upon to make the most use of growing knowledge. So this is something that, and as researchers and the public as well, is our numeracy of our state adequate to understand the AI?
Correct answer there should be 110, so he's not.
You've done that calculation. so one of the things is, in this map of mathematics, see, every time through the time frame, there will be bubbles that come up, little cosmic bubbles come up there, and they attain prominence for a short period of time. And then the bubbles go away. So early part of the century, in the second, in the 20s and 30s, this part was very active, and now that part is very active. So there will be phases in which like bubbles will come and go. But what we really need to have is this kind of display. The maths is a multi-dimensional area, so you need to have an overview of it. And that's very, very important at a very early stage introduction. So kids are very, very good at grasping this. They're me, probably. They are much, much better at doing this. And probably they can even surprise us with the chambers that are hidden under those things. They will be taking us into the chambers under each of these, the graphic pictures. So it's something that we really have to let the general public be aware of this. And I just quickly wanted to say in the AI, the machine learning, people think that AI and machine learning are the same. No, it may not be, because there are other areas which are robotics is still, I didn't touch them deliberately at the moment because it's entirely a different topic. And coming back to my GPT-4, yes, I do agree, but primarily it is statistics on steroids. Linear algebra is actually now, calculus has served us very well from 1786 or whatever to the modern, to the Industrial Revolution and things. And then early part of the century, obviously, we moved to the matrices and how we went off onto the linear algebra directions and eigenvectors and eigenvalues. We went on. They've helped us in computerization, things like that. And now we need to understand what kind of future mathematics we know, which branch again will go away from this, because all of this will be automated anyway. You don't have to do any calculation. Inversion, no, I don't need to do that. What's an inverse matrix? What is Hermitian matrix? These things I don't need to know. The machine does all of those things for me. What I need to know is, the data travels like this. The most average people should know how it's like a matrix movie. What does it mean? And how does this, where does this travel from? What are the spaces in which that can be influenced? You've got a matrix here, there's another matrix there, there's a relationship between them. Those are the higher concepts. People need to understand the topology of these things, how they're related to, and what happens to them, how what kind of manifold it's on. You need to know all of those bigger structures to be able to understand, like a high view of the things, even in a very simplistic terms, not understanding the detailed mathematics of, of all the Kronecker delta, all that sort of thing. We don't need to know any of those stuff. We just need to know the basic stuff. That's what is very, very important. And so far, we talked about the image structure, both spatial and temporal. You take the images one after the other to give us all this kind of information. Just stop and think for one moment. Now the IoTs are, all the Internet of Things that are happening, and there are wearable gadgets coming every day as we speak, more and more, that can actually pick up so much information from us, from the cornea, from the tear film, blood sugar, glucose, eye pressure, your visual acuity, and some of them are so clever. If you look at this picture over here of, if I'm correct, over there, that's supposed to be a virtual reality lens. You put it on and you actually see everything in a virtual reality with your eye, with a contact lens on your eye. It's just spooky sometimes. So this is something that's happening. And this is, for example, records your eye movements and keeps a record of that over there. All the cars that we make, suits we make, this frequency, the speed. So it'll give us some insight into, am I getting Parkinson's early? We don't know that yet. But these are available. And imagine that kind of loads of trillions and trillions of bits of data from every citizen of the world who has that particular. And what the emergent information on there would be to the benefit of humanity. If we pick up something, that'll be a fascinating area to look at. And remember, human eye is a biologic system. As long as we are doing the imaging, there's also some physiological processes going on there. There's something, fluid is moving all the time, energy is being altered and shifted, and everything is happening, electrical activity is happening. So there are other things that we really need to model our AI at the moment. Now, is our AI based on Lagrangian modeling, or is it on the Hamiltonian system? How do we combine the phase systems? We don't know that yet. We need to understand more about this and put them into AI modeling so we can understand more, not only the structure of the disease and what it's telling us, but also the function, what it's expected to be, to get understanding why the liquid and the fluid collected in the retina seems to disappear within a week in one person, and takes 3 months to disappear in another person. Size of the leak is the same, vessel architecture is the same, then what is it? So we need to understand the dynamics behind it. Is it the dead pool? Is the wall thick? We need to understand and we still haven't got any tools to pick up those sensing data. But I was wondering, if we can pick up on Europa what the currents of water is under the 3 kilometers of ice, why can't we actually do that in the eye? Using adaptive optics. Why can't we do that? So I'm sure it will be expensive to do, but it will happen when the technological costs come down. It will be easier for us to understand the spectral shifts within the movement of fluid or whatever is happening, and that will give us much more non-invasive way of looking at things happening in real time. And that will be the useful thing to. So, and also we can evaluate the fluids, the nature of the fluid, what type of fluid, still we have the unanswered question, in terms of, And I just wanted to briefly close down here saying that structural changes are important, fluid dynamic, and then the quantum biology is very, very important, because this is something that we always followed the Newtonian mechanics, even in the dynamics of the eye and everything. But we really need to understand the photon that leaves the sun 8 minutes ago is captured with 100% efficiency on the plant leaf. How does it go there with tunneling, quantum tunneling? This is really fascinating. So similar processes are happening in the human body. And this is very, very fascinating. So we need to spend more time on what is this quantum coherence and what is this quantum tunneling, and where does it happen? What are the influences for that? If we can, especially with the computer technology we have, we can look at those things. At least, I know that because of the certain inherent difficulties in the quantum world itself, we cannot tell the truth. We can only tell the probability of truth. But then, with the churning of the numbers and practical ground truth issues, we may be able to learn more and more. And the 3 practical domains, as I said, the public, and I don't want to touch this because it's quite a difficult area, and it's beyond my pay grade to talk about mathematics and education. So, but I'd like to say that there are still restrictions. So we are using our human mind at the moment, the human logic. That's all we have. That's all we can use. Is that enough for the true nature? We don't know that. What is it to be a bat? To be a bat. And what is it to a bat? To be a bat. We don't know that. This is a real problem. Because I find that still our logic is limited by semantics. And semantics don't explain the whole plethora of the world out there. It's limited to how many words? 5,000? We don't know. how many words? We don't know in language, any language. Put all the human languages collectively put, how much? It's still, so that is the limitation we still have. We're working on it, but we don't. Then why mathematics? This is, I think I like this comment here. I'll let you read that. You can clearly see in those days utilitarianism versus Kantism. So you can see the differences between the two philosophical routes that each of them have taken. So there were camps in those days as well, obviously. So this is fascinating. Thank you. And I thank all my patients, my teachers, and all of you for giving me this opportunity to pose some questions to you, rather. And thank you for your kindness and listening to me.
Thank you for that amazing lecture. It was very absorbing, and I certainly enjoyed that. And I'm sure that there are lots of questions. We have time for questions, plenty of time.
So, the assumption seemed to be that ChatGPT, it's free now, it's going to continue being freely available to everyone. It seems to me unlikely. And restrictions will come in, probably dominated by the profit motive. And even if ChatGPT remains available, maybe the next one produced by somebody else will be on a very much a commercial basis.
I think Google has already released one on the 25th of May. There's one released by Google on the 25th of May, 5 days ago. The issue is, still I have one problem with this ChatGPT is, they don't want to reveal for proprietary reasons the training data on which it trained. Maybe my conversations, they're tapping it from the satellite itself. We don't know that. And government regulations, all these things are, so that begs the fundamental question, how trustworthy are our organizations themselves who are supposed to benefit the mankind without being transparent in the name of business, whatever, security. So we have to be very, very careful about this. Currently, there are no legislations to ask them to forcibly divulge their sources of training. There's no company and no government can actually force them to do that. That is a problem that I find. Unless with democratizations comes accountability, they should be when they're asked to, then that is the time when people can develop trust. That's the reason why people don't have trust at the moment. Trust is a big issue in AI. And that is one of the reasons why. Because the next question is, they'll give you everything for free, but nothing is for free. They collect your data, they sell it to somebody else. They make 10 times the profit of your free usage, or even 100 times the free usage. And then that data is passed on from them to somebody else and metamorphoses into different kind of things, and then they come back to sell you the same thing. And that as ChatGPT. You see, my voice has been trained on it, for example, and then they're selling me ChatGPT, which I contributed to training the data. So this is the kind of thing that we're in the market system. So this is bigger political, this is really a big, but at the moment, the pace is so fast that we have to embrace it to a degree, but at the same time, we have to ask the right questions as well. I think that's the big part of it is participate in it, but ask the right questions as much as possible. But it's still dominated by 5, 6 giants in the industry at the moment. I don't know whether we can decentralize it. One of the decentralizing mechanisms that I found was, just like with blockchain technology, which we are going to be implementing in healthcare at some point, I expect, because that's the way the future has to be, because there's no, you can't be, the hospital just can't hold all your data, no way. It has to be in your hands, and then you have to have the authority to pass it on to whomever you like. You give the key to them. Don't give, see, this is the thing. And there are 2 types, levels of things. Emergency key, somebody who can access it because you're unable to do that, or a voluntary key that you can actually do, with the LPA, your powers of attorney, whatever. So they should be, the future is all the data that we talk about will have to have that kind of enriched, regulated, robust data systems. I don't see that happening in these big runaway AI things at the moment. That's going to be a problem. Sorry, I just transgressed. Thank you.
So I've been doing a lot of work on bias and transparency, and it seems to me that ChatGPT or just GPT in general would significantly suffer from bias. So going back to one of your presentations, you asked a question in regards to either presenting an image of somebody, I think it was a lady who was around 50. I just wondered what words you used that would result in that image of that person, and whether other individuals who perhaps didn't look like that person were also possible images that could have been produced. In other words, if there's a set of individuals, if given if given the words that you use in order to say, tell me who this person is, whether that individual would look different. Would it be a man? Would it be a woman? Would it be somebody who's black, somebody who's Asian, for example?
Excellent question. Very good question. Very pertinent question, actually. It's got more depth in the question than what we can probably cover. See, the question is, I'll write a question on a piece of paper, like the Chinese room one, yeah? That's gone. We all sit in the room. You read the question, you read the question. We all generate pictures. We look at the pictures. What are the biases introduced by each voice modulation? What did it pick up in my voice? What is the difference, undertones, subtones, whatever it's picked up? Or the construction of sentences? Are these cultures more using this one versus that one? Or this kind of frequency of the voice is more common in this group? The associations, these sort of things we haven't figured out, but they're all in there. They're all in the thing. So we need to do more studies on these things, I would imagine, to get to know the real. So, like, for the same thing, both in terms of spatial distribution and finding out, and also temporal, the same person asking the same question 10 times over the next, say, 3 days or 4 days. Does it make a difference? And what is that? If it makes a difference, how do we analyze the difference? And how we actually understand, even try to understand, from what angle that they see. This is the thing. How do the answer generated can be put into different domains? And then you can approach the domain, the answer from top, side, inside, whatever domains you can, relational domain or external domain. If you look at the data and look from there, you may have some subtle clues where the bumps have come from. For example, if my voice sounded more like an Asian voice or a voice, it could have given something else. Or if it's more Caucasian voices, or it's Afro-American voice, it's a different. So it could be. We don't know that because I don't know what data this has been trained on. How much of it is, what's the proportionality of data? I don't have, and they won't reveal it. That's the problem at the moment. So we're still stuck there.
So looking at things like accuracy is a bit misleading then.
It's true.
Should be looking at recall.
Yeah, accuracy means nothing at all. It depends on the sample size, you see, and also the amount of variables in it. Accuracy is just such a bad tool to actually say something is accurate. It's actually not as accurate as it should be, simply because,
I think Ken has a question.
So thank you for your talk. I found it fascinating. It's not a field I've thought about much, so I'm probably going to ask ignorant questions. But from what you're saying, it sounds as though these clever tools, they don't show their working in any sense. They don't show the data sets they're using, and they don't show the models they're using to give the answer they're providing. So when it says this picture of an eye is a woman's eye, it doesn't tell you, you can't work out why it thinks it's a woman's eye. I can imagine sometimes that's not a problem, but sometimes it is.
It is.
How do you handle that issue?
we still haven't figured out that yet. That's the problem that we will probably have to go through the next 5 years of real problem of explainable AI to patients.
But presumably there is a model in there somewhere.
Yes.
Is it just that it's been locked away and you're not allowed to see it, or is it too complex for anybody to comprehend? So
there are a million versions of it. The problem is, of the million versions of where the weight adjustment and reinforcement has happened, The data went back, it said adjusted by 0.2, and then it goes back 0.21, 0.2, it goes back and back and back and back. Difficulty is, what drives the gradients there? Which characteristics from the previous layer drive the next layer's gradient? And this is obviously all mathematical, and clinically, it's just impossible for people to tease out. If I have 20 hidden layers, it's so difficult for me, especially VGG16 or something like that. They have so many layers in the middle, it's very, very difficult to understand, which layer is, how much is bias is going in, what is, how is that feedback coming, and is it calculating the exact rate on the retrograde step? Where is it dropping off this? These are very difficult domains. They're beyond the scope of any normal, certainly academics probably can understand that, but normal clinicians, we have no idea, no clue about what is happening. But we are asking them. That's why, can you tell us, if the patient asks me, if this is how confident are you that my macula, which is missing from my original photograph, is same as what you're showing me now? And that is a big question. I say the computer tells me this, but I don't know the answer, whether that actually is your macula or not, because something else is on top of your macula now. You've got a blood, or you've got a spot, or you've got something else there, and I can't see behind it. That's the problem. So these are the questions that we have to be able to answer then. And that's the problem. I'm sure there will be a lot of work on that to understand more of that. That's a very good question.
To be fair, if a human doctor looks at that retinal scan and tells you things about it, that you have this disease or you don't, or you have this condition or you don't, could they explain what it was in the scan that they were? I mean, so that very scan where you said the computer says it's a woman who's 58, you told us some facts about that scan before that.
Very good question as well.
Can you tell us why you said the things
Yes.
you did about that scan?
As humans, we can tell them that in diabetes, these blood vessels get narrower. And the average diameter of this blood vessel is, say, 1.25 microns, whereas your blood vessel is reduced to 62.5, whatever, 0.625 microns. I can tell them this is a microaneurysm, or this is based on the anatomical details. Or I have said there are exudates here, which should not be there in a normal retina, but then there are exudates here. So we can tell them based on that. But then I can't see a normal-looking retina saying the age of the patient, non-smoker, blood pressure systolic. This is very difficult for me to even imagine. So there are some clues there. I think in nature, there is always that, from the time the Big Bang happened, there are clues left all around us. It's just a question of deciphering them. Maybe the seas hold, because of the motion, the memories. We don't know that. We really don't know. Are the seas, why every wave is telling us a story of something else? We don't know that, you see. But we haven't got the tools to decipher that information. And I was just chatting to her about the ChatGPT. If you put all the ChatGPT into one bundle, and then create several trillions of bundles and record every noise that we hear, birds, animals, can we actually make sense of those things and actually understand what animals talk, what the next probable thing would be? Imagine what kind of world it would be. Terrifying. Imagine the whole thing. It's possible with the computational technology that we can probably predict what the dog is going to do next, after it's, things like that. We can record its voices and we can have variations of those. We don't know that. Thank you.
The risk of asking a question probably first about 50 or more years ago. Do you think AI will ever replace clinicians?
Definition of the word clinician is very important, and what that is. We need to understand fundamentally the terms that we're trying to explore. What a clinician in those days is not the same clinician now. So there's a role continuously remodeling and changing, although terminologies are stuck in some sense because of human semantic issues that we still have with the language. So there's a problem that we have. But my view is, even if we keep the broad category of semantics, the roles will never be the same. My role today is not the same as yesterday, and it will not be tomorrow the same. If it is the same, there's no meaning for my life. That's the whole point of it. Thank you.
What was it? How long did it take the photon to come from the sun?
8 point whatever 8 point. 8 seconds, 8.1 seconds or something like that. 8 seconds. Sorry?
It's about 500 seconds.
Oh,
Yeah, 8 minutes.
8 minutes is how many seconds? Yeah. If you speed the travel is 299, whatever, right, whatever, you got to measure that up. Yeah, that would be.
For a photon to get from the centre of the sun to the surface.
Oh, that will be longer time. That takes 2 trillion years.
Yes.
It takes 2 trillion years from inside to get to the next layer.
And then 8 minutes to do it.
I think Ken has another.
Not 2 billion years, not trillion.
Thank you. Sorry, just because I find this really interesting. So in that example you had of the AI could tell you if this is a woman, this is a 58-year-old, whatever. Firstly, can it put probabilities on those things?
Oh, yes. That's how they come up with over 99%.
And it will tell you those probabilities.
Yes, yes.
But the other thing is then, what are the ethical implications for doing that stuff? So if it says this is a woman, okay, that may be useful, it may be irrelevant, but it doesn't seem massively problematic in many settings. But what if it says this is a user of illegal drugs, or this is someone with cancer, or this is someone who'll be dead in 3 years? If you're an eye surgeon, do you want to know that stuff? Do they want to know that stuff? Do you trust that stuff? But if it's true, maybe it's really helpful. But should we carry this on?
It's not, it's beyond my domain, as you say.
They're going to get hit by a bus tomorrow. But that feels like a terrifying ethical world to be.
That's why American Medical Association has come up with some kind of framework for clinicians using AI. It's very interesting. It's constantly being, it's always a catching up game, isn't it? This one is, because you'll never anticipate what's going to happen. And then by the time you happen, already cases are there. The lawyers are knocking on your door. So the thing is, it's very interesting how the race of keeping up pace, your legislation and the rules and the guidance and the thing will always stay behind the cutting edge frontiers of science will always be. That is the nature itself. So as long as we are responsive quickly, before enough damage is done, then that's the best one can do. And that's, at the moment, the academic bodies and Royal Colleges, they're all involved in this kind of regulatory environment. There's a constant review of what is going on, how far we can give information, what rights patients have about this, and especially linking it with GDPR as well. It's quite important to understand the data is not owned by you, it's owned by them. So it is their data. So you need to understand that, and you have to have explicit permission in certain situations for the use of data in a particular way. And most often, I think, in the name of the AI, you capture a lot more than what they've actually consented for. And that would be interesting to look at the studies related to that. What is that information that they haven't even thought about, but you captured from them, that information.
So you've taken an image in order to make a diagnosis about the health of their eye, and the technology says, oh, you have early stage treatable something else.
Yeah.
Well, if I were the patient, I want to be told about that, but if that's not the purpose of getting the data, does that mean the clinician can't tell me? It seems nuts. So
It's very difficult, yes. I think if my personal view is, a data that saves the patient's life should be disclosed whatever it is, whichever specialty you are. The overriding importance of any diagnosis is early intervention. And if you can contribute outside your field, it doesn't matter which field you come from. I diagnosed several diseases through the eye of brain tumors, of liver diseases, cardiac problems, renal problems, children with various abnormalities, congenital abnormalities. I look through the eyes and we diagnose these things over the years. We've referred them to particular specialists, for the neurosurgeons or somewhere else to do all that. So same applies to the AI as well. If I pick up something on AI, I have a moral duty and an ethical duty to involve the patient in it. The amount of worry is their domain. And that's where you have a clinical psychologist or somebody you have to get involved in there to do that. But the facts remain the facts. And the facts have material influence on the course of the patient's progress of life. And then you have you're duty bound to do that. And anybody
So if you want an insurance company or finance company getting hold of that information, because they might refuse your insurance or mortgage or whatever.
That is a state responsibility. Who has the conduit? This is where I think personally, I think a blockchain system has to completely come in and say that nobody else can access this other than the patient, and our explicit nature of the patient. This is where I think we will move into that domain, but at the moment, we're wasting so much on the planet at the moment for keys. Looking for those keys will be very interesting. But we need to develop new methods of how we use the existing keys of existing whatever AI blockchain platform you want to go for. Actually, blockchain as a service is now available, so people can actually use BAS, blockchain as a service, just like software as a service. You can actually use that nowadays. So it's fascinating how these companies are coming up with sub-keys, and you can actually enroll and use those and benefit from the offshoots of the other fields. Thank you.
Isn't it a scenario, kind of like that's a more advanced situation, perhaps now, if you go for an eye test. What you consent is to check your eyes for glasses. But if you're seeing signs of glaucoma or diabetes, then they will tell you to go and see a doctor. It's really just a more advanced process today, really.
Yes.
So I think we'll hopefully be doing that for
Yes.
decades now.
You can pick up kidney tumors from the picture of the eye. Alzheimer's has been published recently. I can pick up early signs of Alzheimer's by just looking at the retina. It's very frightening for the family, but you need to tell them. Be prepared for it. This is something that they have to.
Yeah. They will tell us, and they don't tend to say, oh,
tell them.
yeah, tell me.
You just cannot not tell them. You just have.
Sorry, I'm taking you down
No.
my question here, but that seems helpful and sensible when that's a benefit to the patient. What if it's not? So, ridiculous scenario probably, but what if the photograph demonstrates that the person is a murderer? It's a bit like in other worlds that you, in a different sort of conversation, you hear a safeguarding admission. So someone in a conversation tells you they've done a thing. What's your responsibility?
Social engineering is not the domain of medical professionals, whereas the data, if it is leaked to, for example, an fostering agency, the data information, and then they may go through the health record saying that he's an alcoholic, he's something like that, and I don't want to give this kid for adoption. And it happened in Minnesota for one of some of those big cases of AI barring somebody because he had a conviction for speeding or something, and then he was barred from having adopting children. This is a big case that went on a few years ago. It's fascinating to see how this can be misused. So you're absolutely, that's where the state legislation has to come, the debate has to come in. And it's not up to the professionals, it's a collective, it's a human responsibility. As a society, what kind of society we want to live in? And do we want a big brother society looking at us, all the things, and then telling us, this door opens for you, that doesn't? well, we don't know, that's the difficulty, you see? That is where we have to have an open conversation with these things, the technology, because imagination is the limit. You just got to take it wherever you can. That's the only thing. Thank you. I'm sorry for going on and on.
Any other questions?
Thank you so much for a wonderful...
In that case, I have
far away.
one more question. I think it's been covered already, but just in general, it looks like AI seems to be taking over a bit, particularly in this area. And is there any need to worry about it, or do we need to regulate that?
The worry would be not knowing about it. Worry is not knowing about it is the worry. Knowing about it can only reassure us it's an assistive tool. Simply, there are two things that it cannot do at the moment, although there's an empathy part of AI coming in slowly. How emotional AI, how can AI be emotional? That's a big thing. But empathy, human touch is still our strength and domain. In future, I'd like to see what will happen is the CEO of a bank will be the lowest getting paid. The person in the nursing home holding the hand will be the highest paid. They'll be they'll have 110,000, whereas the other person will get 10,000. I think that's how the role reversal will happen. Whether it'll happen in our time or not, we don't know. but it will happen. And when is that going to happen? When is that human character, very, very important, human empathy, human touch, if we survive as a species? That will be the thing.
So we don't need to worry about it.
No. They're all assistive tools. There is a question of we are far away from AGI. So this is called, Hans Moravec said this. He said, a computer can replace a specialist like my job easily, but it can't replace a 5-year-old kid's enthusiasm to do the things in his thinking. So there's no AGI. It's a narrow intelligence. Because once I stepped into ophthalmology, I became so narrow and so good at it, but the computer can run past me. That's the problem with it, in a narrow problems. And that is always the case. And so because I'm only concerned with this world, I think it's taking over the world. Yes, it does take over your world, but it's not taking over the world. So one has to really reflect back, come back out of the hole, and look at the bigger picture. You see, that's what we have to do.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions or thoughts, comments? So I would like to thank Dr. Vempali again for giving this lecture.
Thank you. I hope it was. Thank you so much. Thank you all for listening. Thank you.